Hey everyone, happy, I guess Tuesday, November 17th. I hope you guys are staying safe out there. Obviously, if you are paying attention to the world and the news at all, obviously COVID-19 cases are spiking, even here in our little community of Gatesville. So, just being motherly here, wear your masks, wash your hands, do all the good stuff to hopefully keep you from getting it. But this week, we are actually going to be doing the Crusades as a little mini unit. Because of our coronacation that we took last week, on Thursday and Friday, and then yesterday being a virtual day, we decided to kind of take the Crusades out of Unit 5 and let them be like a standalone little miniature unit for the next 4 days. So that when we come back from Thanksgiving, we just truly start Unit 5 and focus in on, medieval Europe without the Crusades involved. So today we started the Crusades in class and we talked about the first 4. There are 9. And it's funny, a lot of students, they get all excited about the Crusades and they're like, ooh, the Crusades. And it's funny because I'm like, yeah, ooh, they're not that great. A lot of times the Crusades, we build them up in our heads as being like way cooler to study than they really are, because they have been romanticized in, of course, literature and movies and pop culture and all kinds of things. But the reality of the Crusades, historically speaking, there's nothing glorious or romantic about any of it. So we kind of ended Unit 4. I was foreshadowing that the Crusades were coming. And, in 1095, Pope Urban II is going to call the First Crusade. And every year, I ask the question, on a test or quiz or whatever, why did the Crusades happen? And I get the same answer from so many students every year. They're like, oh, the Christians hated the Muslims and they wanted to take back the Holy Land. Guys, if the Christians just simply fought the Crusades based on the fact that they had this deep-seated hatred for Muslims having control of the Holy Land, then the Crusades would have happened 350 years prior to 1095. Okay, Muslims had control of Jerusalem since the late 600s, early 700s. So that has absolutely that is not the correct answer. What ends up happening is, okay, if you look at the political control, and that's allergies, I do not have COVID, of the Arab Empire, you have, of course, the creation of it with Muhammad, the prophet, and then you have your 4, rightly guided caliphs. Then you have the Umayyad dynasty. Then you have the Abbasid dynasty. And then the Abbasid dynasty, of course, is overthrown by the Seljuk Turks. Now, the Seljuk Turks are where we have the problem. They begin attacking and killing Christian pilgrims trying to get to Jerusalem and to the Holy Lands. Prior to the Seljuk Turks taking over, the Umayyads and the Abbasids allowed for Christian pilgrims to freely come and go. Okay, and so therein lies the issue, and that is the reason why you have the First Crusade launched. So if you will notice, it is the Byzantine Emperor Alexius I that actually asks Pope Urban to help them out. It is not the Patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church, because if you'll remember from Unit 3, remember they officially said we break up. They excommunicated each other. It's official. I don't like you putting it on paper. Remember all that? So it is the emperor himself that actually asks the Pope to come and help. So at the Council of Clermont, Pope Urban II is going to have this big rally, and he is going to say this great speech. And in that speech, the Pope himself promises heaven, and immediate forgiveness of sins to any crusader that goes to the Holy Land in defense of it in God's name that dies. I promise that all sins are forgiven. You immediately get to heaven. And the crowd goes wild, and they start screaming out, Deus Vult, Deus Vult. And that is Latin for God wills it, or God wills it so, or it is the will of God. It translates to any of those things. But Deus Vult then becomes, like, you could say, almost like the slogan or the battle cry or whatever for the crusading armies. There's actually tons of really funny memes about Deus Vult if you ever want to go look up historical memes that are funny. But here is a good just visual of, again, what's the issue, what's the beef. It boils down to the Muslim Turks. Okay, not all Muslims, it's the Muslim Turks that stop Christians from being able to enter the Holy Land, and they attack and kill them. All right. And the Byzantine Empire is also really scared that the Turks are going to be way more aggressive and more violent and potentially come in and attack Constantinople and further weaken the Byzantine army. And so there's, again, not all Muslims agree with attacking Christian pilgrims. You have to remember, not all Muslims are the same ethnicity. The Arab Empire at its height stretched across North Africa, into Spain and Portugal, all across the Arabian Peninsula. And so, again, this is specifically Muslim Turks. And it would have been, honestly, so great if the Crusaders of the First Crusade would have also gotten that memo. Because what they are going to do in the First Crusade is they are going to march predominantly out of France. And yes, some out of the Holy Roman Empire. They're going to basically level up in Constantinople. They're going to, that means gain additional soldiers from the Byzantine Empire. And then they're going to descend on the Holy Land. The Crusades, the very first one, again, is frustrating because the Crusaders themselves go in, and when they are capturing Jerusalem, even though their leaders and their commanders had specifically told them, you cannot treat all Muslims as the enemy, that is not how it works over here, they still rounded up and killed so many innocent Muslims that were living in the city of Jerusalem. There's records of Christian crusader armies that went in and rounded up women, children, unarmed men, the elderly, threw them into Muslim mosques and burned them to the ground with all of them alive inside. And, it's terrible and it's awful. And honestly, it doesn't make the Christian crusaders any better than the Muslim Turks who were killing Christian pilgrims. And the deal is that, they didn't have a good understanding of the culture and ethnic breakdown of that area. I mean, that had always been an area where Jews and Christians and Muslims, or it had been, at least for the last 400 years, had been operating in a relatively kind of peaceful agreement and peaceful life. And again, just because the Turks were attacking Christian pilgrims, that didn't mean that Arabian Muslims agreed, or that Fatimid Muslims agreed, or that, North African Muslims agree. You can't condemn them all for the actions of one ethnic group that, yes, is also Muslim. So, I always say, the First Crusade is the successful crusade in the fact that Christians do take over the Holy Land and they set up the Crusader states. But in the process, again, they kill a large amount of innocent Muslims that are in Jerusalem and in the Holy Land in general, and they basically piss off all of what used to be the peaceful Muslims all around them. If you look, yes, you've gained this nice little strip of purple, but all around you in tan are ethnic Muslims that didn't have beef with you, but now they have beef with you. So, like, slow clap. Great job. And the subsequent 8 crusades that we have to talk about this week, none of them are going to be successful. They're never going to recapture the Holy Land again. Spoiler alert. Sorry. So I'm saying, like, most students are all like, wait, I thought the crusades were way cooler than this. I'm like, yeah, no. So sorry. Anyways, moving on though, they established these Latin Crusader states, and what's going to happen is there is a sultan named Saladin that comes out of northern Egypt. He is a Fatimid Muslim, and he is very wealthy. He's also like a really good person. Like, he's a good guy. He's a good leader. And he is going to come in and start retaking the Crusader states because he's disgusted by, honestly, what happened in the First Crusade. And I mean, like, rightfully so. And so, boom, the Second Crusade is launched, but Saladin and his forces actually beat the ever-living crap out of the Second Crusader army. So they go back with their tail between their legs to Europe, and it takes them 50 years or so to kind of regroup. And then they launch the Third Crusade. And this is probably the most famous crusade because it has, of course, King Richard the Lion-Hearted coming out of England. He's the first English king to get involved in a crusade. And of course, while he's gone, we all know the story about his little brother, King John, then, being the regent while he's gone and overtaxing the English people. And boom, here comes Robin Hood. So if you've ever watched any of the Robin Hood movies, of course, Richard's off on a crusade and King John's terrible. And so Robin Hood starts to, of course, steal from the rich to give to the poor to make up for all of that. And again, like, there's some historical truths to all of this. I'm actually tomorrow, if I can find it, I'm going to bring an article that I read from my history periodical that I subscribe to. And it's about how the legend of Robin Hood got started. It's pretty neat, actually. So, but the deal is, on the Third Crusade, is that Richard is going to leave with his army that's English, but right alongside them are French armies that are also going on this Third Crusade. And if you don't know already, you will know by the time that you are done with this class. The English and the French historically hate one another. All the way up until World War I, if you look at any conflict that takes place in Europe, you can bet that it basically started with England or France. Or whoever started it, England's on the opposing side that France is on. Like, it's constant. You can look at places throughout the world. The French and Indian War. It's just the 7 Years' War spilled over onto the North American continent, and it's England and France. It's constant. They hate one another. And in a lot of ways, we can thank their hatred of one another historically for our independence. So, like, because France wouldn't have come to the rebels' aid during the American Revolution if they didn't have their deep-seated hatred of England. So, big clap to that hatred on a historical level. But, with this hatred of one another, you can imagine, England and French soldiers trying to walk side by side to the Holy Land. Like, they're going to fight. And that's what ends up happening is they start fighting amongst one another, and the French bail and go back to France, leaving the English and Richard the Lion-Hearted alone. And so, outnumbered, not looking too hot for Richard against Saladin. Well, remember, Saladin's a pretty decent guy. And so he is going to allow Richard to enter into a peace negotiation. And Saladin even says, like, listen, I'm not a Turk. I don't plan on killing Christian pilgrims trying to come in here. Like, I will take it back to the way that it was. And Richard is like, that's great. If you can guarantee that Christian pilgrims, as just like before, can come and go freely without fear of attack, we're good to go. So yay, that should be the end of it. But it's not, because remember, this is only 3. We have 6 more to go. The Fourth Crusade is probably the most infamous because it is a massive betrayal of Christians towards Christians. So this one's a little different. So you need to remember the name Pope Innocent III. He is going to come up again in Unit 5. And he is, like I said, he's probably the most infamous pope in history. He is highly, highly greedy, very, very corrupt. Honestly, kind of evil in a lot of ways. Not a good dude, but yet here he is, the Vicar of Christ. And after Saladin's death, he is going to launch the Fourth Crusade, saying they're not going to keep up their end of the bargain now that Saladin is dead, even though they had been for almost a decade at that point. This is a power grab on the part of Innocent III. And what ends up happening is the Crusader army never even makes it to the Holy Land. They actually sack the city of Constantinople. They don't make it to the Holy Land. Now, there's a lot of historical debate on Innocent III's role in the betrayal of Constantinople by the Crusader army. There are historians on one side of the fence that say Innocent III really did not sanction the loot and sacking of Constantinople, whereas there are historians on the other side of the fence that are like, oh, yes, he knew that was going to happen. He knew that was going on. He totally was behind it, even though publicly he condemned it and was all like, what are you doing? You can't do this. He benefited from it financially. I mean, again, with Constantinople weakened, it allowed for Rome to become more powerful. There was also tons of gold that came out of the looting and the sacking of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusader army that ends up in Rome. How does that happen? Scratch your head. Again, Innocent III is anything but innocent, and his track record, in my personal opinion as a historian, shows that he probably had some type of hand in, maybe not the initial negotiations that got them to Constantinople, but I guarantee you the fallout, I mean, yeah, he came out publicly and condemned it, but he gained too much out of it to not have been yeah, I'm okay with it. I mean, he's quoted in saying, kill them all, God will know his own. So, I mean, again, a little genocidal there. And again, power hungry, greedy, the whole shebang. We will be talking about him more in Unit 5. But obviously, Fourth Crusade is just a huge betrayal towards the Byzantine Empire by the Fourth Crusader army. And by many people view it also as a betrayal from Pope Innocent III towards the Patriarch and Constantinople. And the Byzantine Empire, after that happens, is never going to be the same. They're going to be, like it says, barely limp along until its ultimate defeat by the Ottoman Turks in 1453. Okay, so this is where we ended for the day in class. This is a really funny, very kind of sarcastic British humor little video that I show every year. And so I hope you like it. Take the time to watch it. You'll get a kick out of some of the stuff that it showcases. Tomorrow we will be talking about the Children's Crusade. And then basically, I mean, spoiler alert, Crusades 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they don't really accomplish anything. So we're not going to talk about them other than, yeah, they happened, but nothing happened. And then we will watch the crash course video over the Crusades. And on Thursday, we will talk about Knights Templar. So I will see you guys then. Have a restful Tuesday night. Bye.